very much. So this is a remarkable room to be in. It's beautiful, but it's kind of lacking air by now, right? So I realize you've been sitting here for many hours and you've been listening to a lot of content. Wonderful, inspiring stories. I get to be the last one today. I hope you can take another half hour. It's just that. And then we get drinks and dinner, and so stick here. Great. So I'm Merete Sanderhoff. I'm a curator of digital museum practice at the National Gallery in Copenhagen, Denmark. Statens Museum for Kunst. That's why the acronym is SMK. My slides are on SlideShare. I've been giving this talk a couple of times recently, so the title differs, but it's the same talk. If you want to check some links or quotes or something, it's all up there on SlideShare CC by SA, so you can even copy and reuse. And I tweet at M. Sanderhoff in case you want to stay in touch after the conference. I want to loop back to what Seb was talking about in his presentation this morning. Seb said that people don't come to museums for technology. And that's a learning that he highlighted, and I believe this is crucial. Something that a lot of us working with digital development in museums have experienced and learned over these rapid development years recently, where digital has been something we all had to explore and deal with and try out and test and learn from. So the way we work with digital in the team that I'm part of is not to do with museum visits. It's a completely different story where digital is something that enhances people's experience of our collections, independent of ever coming to the museum. And that's actually one of the really powerful things, I believe, that digital can do. And it's what enables us to create new narratives out of our old collections, because the digitized collections can be a raw material for new creativity, learning, and storytelling. So I could actually just stop now. That was the baseline, but I'll just take you through my talk. So as we all know, museums have always been places for learning, for creativity, for inspiration, for research. But today, these kinds of things, learning, acquiring knowledge, developing your skills and your sort of place in the world, happens in many, many places, and very often it's outside formal learning institutions like museums. This is where Open GLAM becomes a real opportunity. Open GLAM stands for Open Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. Because opening up our digitized collections, data, images, content, really opens up opportunities of a new kind for learning and creativity. So I'm part of Europeana. How many people in the room know about Europeana? Raise your hands, please. I'm glad. Europeana is it's a platform for over 50 million digitized objects of European cultural heritage. But it's also a network of people like us who can get together and share knowledge, standards, challenges, and go forward about all this digitization together, instead of reinventing the wheel all by ourselves in our local institutions. And one of the things that Europeana is really doing an important job at is formulating new shared standards in the wake of digitization and the disruption that has brought into our field. And one of the new standards that Europeana has introduced is the Public Domain Charter. So the public domain is a commons of cultural heritage which belongs to all of us. We all share responsibility for it, and it comes into being once copyright expires. So that's a pretty big chunk of all of our cultural heritage. It's actually all of the stuff made by human beings that have been dead for more than 70 years. There's quite a lot of that in our collections. And the Europeana Public Domain Charter states that works that are in the public domain in analog form continue to stay in the public domain once digitized. Now I'd be curious again to ask, how many of you who have public domain works in your collections and have digitized them actually follow that? Woo! Okay, so this is quite a new kind of mindset for us as a sector. But I'd like to tell you some stories today from the museum where I work, inspired by other museums that have gone before us, about the massive potential for actually embracing the public domain. And you know, it's not just a matter of doing it because it's right and it's in a charter. It's also about doing it because the public is really beginning to expect that from us and demand that from us. So here are some of the pioneers that have inspired what we do at SMK. And I'd like to highlight just one here in Europe, which has been extremely important for the Open GLAM development, because they've shown such boldness and such results with opening up their digitized collections at huge scale and really encouraging everybody all over the world to be creative based on these beautiful old collections, sharing it in the highest quality possible so that people can really enjoy and be inspired and make something with this collection. The director of the Rijksmuseum says in an interview a couple of years ago that this is actually not just a way of engaging with old collections in more playful ways, but it's a way to support learning. We all know, both from our own days in school, and if we have kids, we know that sometimes they are bored when they sit down and listen to a teacher. But if they get to do something hands-on and actually touch things and build things, that enhances their learning capacity. And that's actually what Taco Dibbits is saying here, that remix is a way to learn. And once you've remixed an artwork, you never forget it again, because you've been making choices, you've been going into details, you've been selecting the parts that you thought were important, you've really been looking at that artwork. So, digitized collections can become building blocks. This is not something that we museums invented. This is something I think that we've began to understand from looking at the world around us. So for instance, maker culture is something that we all know about. It's happening. It's some of the kind of stuff that's happening outside formal learning institutions nowadays. And it's all about DIY, do-it-yourself, learning by doing, meeting up through the internet, connected social media with people who share the same interests as you, and becoming friends over shared interests. So there's a lot of great potential there for learning. And the interesting thing is that more formal learning institutions like museums are starting to pick up how we can learn from maker culture. So in the report Innovating Pedagogy from 2013, it stated that maker culture has attracted the interest of educators concerned about students' disengagement from STEM subjects in formal educational settings. Maker culture is seen as having the potential to contribute to a more participatory approach to learning and create new pathways into topics that will make them more alive and relevant to users. And of course, art is a part of this equation. Whoops. Because with universal access to cultural heritage as raw materials for new creativity and innovation, Bildung becomes closely connected to building. So Bildung, I'm sure all of you know this wonderful German word, which means it can't really be translated into English, but something like lifelong learning, your human education, which never really stops. Creating an understanding of the world and your own place in it becomes a product of active processing, adapting, rebuilding, and repurposing. This mindset is at the base of our digital strategy, or just our strategy as a whole, at SMK. We have, for a number of years, been committed to become a catalyst for users' creativity. And the first step, as we actually discussed earlier today, of getting there has been to release our digitized collection of public domain artworks into the public domain. So we have roughly 25,000 images on our website for free download, and they are marked with the CC0 public domain dedication. It's part of the Creative Commons toolbox, and it means we give away all the rights that we have of the pictures of the artworks. This is a sort of a law thing. We can talk about that over drinks. But this means that our collection in digital form becomes a toolbox. And now I'd like to tell you a couple of the things that enables us to do. So for instance, open art can improve urban environments. In Copenhagen right now, the metro is being expanded. And this gives a lot of local citizens a lot of grief. So they have the metro construction sites next to their apartments and their schools and so on, and it's horrible. It goes on for years. In collaboration with the metro company, we did a project where we have a program like the Tate Collectives called the Young People's Art Labs. And the art pilots, the volunteers there, they sat down with local citizens at a certain construction site and remixed public domain images and created a 70-meter long fence around the construction site, which actually made the citizens there much more happy about the metro construction. They felt empowered. They felt like they had decision power on what they were looking at when they opened the window. They feel better about the process because of this toolbox in their hands. Open art can also improve social conditions. The art pilots did a project in an injection room for drug users in Copenhagen. This injection room is a meeting place for drug users. There are like 700 intakes a day. It's open 23 hours a day. It's a place for people to have a safe environment where they can have their fix. But it's also a very anonymous and sort of clinical space. It doesn't tell anything. And it kind of has a sad atmosphere in the nature of the case. But the art pilots and the users of the injection room sat down together, looked at artworks, remixed them, and created sort of a wallpaper for the injection room. And this enabled the users of the injection room to define and tell their personal stories and let that be reflected in this injection room. So it has really changed the feeling of the room. And again, it's about empowerment of these people. Open art can also fuel business development. Since we released our collection into the public domain, we have had a steady stream of contacts from startup companies around the world saying, this is great. This is the kind of material that we can use to build new services, apps, experiences for our clients, our customers. We want to work together with you. One of the things that's happening right now is we're not building an app. MadPixel in Spain is building an app using images and stories about artworks in our collection. It's going to be a second canvas app. It's where you can experience the artworks independent of a visit or during a visit to the museum, and really immerse yourself in high-resolution images and great storytelling about the artworks. We just deliver the building blocks, and they do the work, because that's what they're great at. We're not especially great at building apps. Or we can create a contest for jewelry designers. This is going on right now in a collaboration with the Dutch-American platform called Shapeways. They excel in 3D printing for creatives. It's like Etsy for 3D geeks. And they approached us saying, why don't we make a contest for a jewelry community using your artworks as the inspiration. So until 16th of June, if you have an idea when you look at the selected artworks to create a piece of jewelry, you can enter it into the competition, and the winner and the 4 finalists will have their designs printed by Shapeways. They can print in gold and silver and bronze and everything. I didn't know that. And we're seeing amazing entries from all over the world. Within just a couple of days, there were like dozens. Open art can also fight fake news. So if you read recently, Peter Kaufmann's article in the post-truth era, he states about us, the formal education institutions. We are all in the attention business, and we have to play to win. And this is my highlight: to direct attention to the real knowledge that we produce. Publishing our material online for free use and reuse is the first step. So why is this? Well, it's because there's a constant flow of information coming from all corners of society, and sometimes from dodgy corners. But the kind of knowledge that we produce is actually validated and under critical scrutiny, and we keep discussing it and refining it and developing it all the time. This is one of the things we are really great at. Then it's a real pity if it's locked up in paywalled silos that the general public won't have access to and will never know is there. So it's actually a really important thing for us to do, to share the knowledge we produce openly. And open art can improve access to knowledge, for instance, on Wikipedia. At SMK, we work closely with Wikipedians to share insights on how we can actually bring the knowledge we produce and the collections we have digitized into Wikipedia, which is the place all of us goes to search for the first pieces of knowledge in any kind of research process. The interesting thing with Wikipedia, and I don't know how many of you are really aware of this, is that it is through and through an open encyclopedia. It's written by volunteers all over the world. They get no money for it, and all the content you find and use in Wikipedia is free. So there's no copyright at all in Wikipedia. And that means that they cannot use copyrighted images. It needs to have an open license in order to be in Wikipedia. And that's why it's so important for many museums to consider, is it worth maybe putting an open license on our public domain images so that they can enrich Wikipedia and so that it can, make the world aware that these artworks are actually in this museum. What we're seeing in Wikipedia, in our collaboration there, is when we, for instance, run an Artist of the Month, these articles that are often just stubs, they just grow magically because it's a collective effort. It's a piece of work that often curators and researchers in museums won't have time to do themselves. We're tied up in making exhibitions and publishing research in acknowledged journals and so on. But on Wikipedia, together, we can actually bring our knowledge out where people are. And it's a way to build communities, because people from within museums, people who are interested in art history outside museums, and Wikipedians get together, get to know each other, and foster collaborations. And, the numbers just speak for themselves. We have the same kind of traffic to our museum website that all of you do, but on Wikipedia, our images get really, really out there. Open art can change museums from within, because people start building with them and getting creative. A little while ago, we did a hack of the museum where we invited 13 artists and designers to be inspired by images in the public domain and create new artworks from it, make remixes. And this young guy, for instance, he's 20 years old. He created a remix of 22 skies from Danish Golden Age paintings and made a digital projection onto the ceiling of the museum, actually opening up the vaults of the museum to the sky. A designer created clothes based on old paintings, thinking that the everyday canvas of the clothes we all wear in the streets would be a great way of showing the art in people's everyday lives. And maker culture was very prominent as well. This Finnish artist, Kati Hyppä, she made a motorized pop-up version of a Hammershøi painting with a little motor that made the light change through the windows of the painting, like the course of a day from sunset to sunrise. And what the artists and designers told us is that the digitized collections that are freely available like this is like a giant toolbox with a fantastic amount of materials to work with. The next big thing for us to really get better at as a sector is to understand and really be able to demonstrate the impact of going digital. We're all here in this room at this conference in Riga to talk about digital transformation. And we all feel in our everyday lives that it makes a huge difference. But how do we tell that to decision makers, to funders, to politicians, to boards, etc., in ways that really make a difference? In fact, how can we assess the impact of open art, of digital enhanced experiences for education, for welfare, for society? And here we're back to Europeana. The deputy director of Europeana recently wrote a blog post. If you work in a purpose-driven, non-profit organization, and more specifically in the digital cultural heritage sector, we share a problem. We should be feeling fine and dandy because we work for a great cause, but we have very few instruments at our disposal to assess the results of our actions and be happy about it. This leaves us in a very unsatisfying and vulnerable position. The work we do comes at a significant cost to society, but we can't systematically assess that it was worth it. Did it improve the way our children are educated? Did it result in a stronger, more cohesive society? Did it enable artists to create groundbreaking new creative works? What positive change in society have we contributed to? In a word, did we have impact? The great thing is that this thing we're all struggling with is being embraced by Europeana, who are working on creating an impact assessment framework for cultural heritage. This is something that they need a lot of help from the network to actually do. That's why they've created a task force of professionals who are skilled in this. I'm part of that task force. I'm not especially skilled, but I have a great case study to offer. So we're working on SMK as one of the cases. And there's a website where all the case studies, all the process is being shared openly. And this is also a community for all of us to join and learn from this process. So it's impact.tools. SMK Open, which is our current project around opening up our collections, is, as I said, a case study for this. And we have also made digitization and social impact the topic of the upcoming Sharing is Caring conference, which takes place in the cultural capital of Europe, Aarhus in Denmark, in November. So if you're interested in learning more about this, check out impact.tools and check out sharecare.nu for more information. I'd like to end my talk with a quote from the director of SMK, Mikkel Bo. As museums, we do not hold any patent on how cultural heritage can and should be interpreted and used. Our role is increasingly to facilitate the general public's use of cultural heritage for learning, creativity, and innovation. Today, the museum as a place of enlightenment is based on interaction. We are all part of this web. We enlighten each other. Thank you.